The ship moved through the darkness between stars like a silver fish swimming through an endless ocean. Inside, Ambassador Ra stood at the viewing window and watched the light of distant suns pass by. Her body was made of living crystal, and the starlight made her glow with soft colors. She had made this journey many times before, but today was different. Today she was not alone. Behind her, a group of young diplomats talked and laughed among themselves. They came from different species across the conclave of enlightened species. There was a being made of swirling gas contained in a magnetic field. There was a creature with 6 legs and eyes that saw heat instead of light. There was Myra 7, a machine intelligence housed in a floating silver sphere. And there were others, 12 in total, all young, all curious, all thinking they already knew everything worth knowing. Ra listened to their conversation without turning around. "I still do not understand why we must make this journey," was saying. His voice clicked and buzzed as he spoke. "The Sol system is empty. There is nothing there but old rocks and dead monuments." "It is tradition," Myra 7 replied in her musical voice. "All diplomats must visit Sol 3 before they can serve in the conclave. This has been true for as long as records exist." "Tradition without reason is just foolishness," said. "We have faster ships now. We have better technology. Why waste time visiting a system that has been dead for 800,000 years?" Shifted his gaseous form, colors swirling inside him like clouds in a storm. "I have heard stories," he said quietly. "My elders speak of the Sol system with strange voices. They become sad and happy at the same time. I asked my teacher why, and she told me I would understand when I saw it myself." "Stories for children," clicked dismissively. "We are diplomats now, not children listening to bedtime tales." Ra finally turned from the window. The young ones fell silent when they saw her ancient face. She was over 4,000 years old, which was very old even for a. Her crystal body had grown dark with age, like stone worn smooth by endless water. "You speak of things you do not understand," she said. Her voice rang like bells in the quiet ship. "You call the Sol system dead. You call it empty. You are wrong. The Sol system is the most alive place in all the galaxy. Every breath you take, every thought you think, every dream you dream exists because of what happened there." Many eyes blinked in confusion. "I do not understand." "No," Ra agreed. "You do not, but you will." The ship traveled on. Hours passed, then days. The young diplomats grew bored with the long journey. They played games and read files and argued about politics. Ra watched them and said nothing. She remembered when she had been young like them. She remembered thinking she understood the universe. She remembered being wrong. On the 7th day, the ship's navigation system announced they were entering the Sol system. "Finally," muttered, "let us see this great sacred place and be done with it." But when the ship came out of faster-than-light travel, said nothing more. None of them did. They all stood at the viewing window and stared in complete silence. The Sol system was not empty at all. Monuments filled the space between planets. Statues the size of moons floated in perfect orbits around the yellow sun. Each statue showed the same type of creature, a being that stood on 2 legs with 2 arms, 2 eyes, and soft skin that looked impossibly fragile. The creatures were shown in different poses. Some held tools. Some held children. Some reached up toward the stars with expressions of hope and wonder on their faces. "What are they?" whispered. His gaseous form had turned pale with shock. "They are humans," Ra said. "The first species, the cedars, the ancient ones." The ship moved deeper into the system, passing monument after monument. There were thousands of them, each one maintained by automated systems that had run without stopping for over 800,000 years. Lights still blinked on their surfaces. Repair drones still flew around them, fixing any damage, cleaning any dust, keeping everything perfect. "Who maintains all this?" Myra 7 asked. "The cost must be enormous." "Everyone maintains it," Ra said. "Every species in the conclave contributes. It is our most sacred duty. We keep these monuments clean and bright so that we never forget, so that our children never forget, so that their children never forget. Forget what? Asked. His voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. Now he sounded like what he truly was, a young being faced with something too large to understand. Ra pointed to the yellow sun at the center of the system. That star is called Sol. The third planet from that star was called Earth, and on that planet, over 800,000 years ago, a species called humanity looked up at the night sky and felt very, very alone. She paused, letting her words sink in. At that time, the galaxy was empty of intelligent life. The humans searched for thousands of years and found nothing. No signals, no cities, no other minds to talk to. They were the only ones, the first ones, and they knew they would probably die before they ever met another species. That is very sad, said softly. Yes, Ra agreed. It was very sad, but the humans did not let their sadness destroy them. Instead, they made a choice. If they could not find other intelligent life in the galaxy, they would create it. The ship passed a monument showing a human planting seeds in soil. The human's face was tired but smiling. They became gardeners, Ra continued. They traveled to every planet that could support life. They planted the seeds of evolution. They changed atmospheres and oceans and soil. They buried machines deep in the ground that would guide development over millions of years. They did this to thousands of worlds, knowing they would never live to see what grew. But that means, Myra 7 said slowly, her processors working through the implications, that means we are their seeds, all of us, every species in the conclave. Yes, Ra said. The grew from minerals they seeded on Mai. The evolved from microbes they placed in the acidic seas of their planet. The formed from gases they arranged in the clouds of their nebula. Even you, Myra 7, exist because humans first created the simple machine intelligences that eventually evolved into your ancestors. The young diplomats stared at the monuments with new eyes. These were not just statues of some forgotten species. These were statues of their creators, their parents, their gods in a very real sense. They gave us everything, whispered. They gave us existence. Yes, Ra said, and they asked for nothing in return. They knew they would be forgotten. They knew that by the time any of us gained the ability to understand what they had done, they would be dust and legend. They helped us anyway. They loved us before we existed. The ship continued its journey toward Earth. The young diplomats had stopped talking. They stood at the window and looked at the monuments and tried to understand a love so large it crossed 800,000 years. Ra watched them and felt the old familiar grief in her crystal heart. She had made this journey over 100 times. It never got easier. The weight of humanity's gift never became lighter. Come, she said gently. There is much more to see and much more to understand. By the time we leave this system, you will know why we remember. You will know why we must never stop remembering. The ship flew on, carrying its cargo of young minds toward the truth that would change them forever. The ship landed on Mars, the fourth planet from Sol. Once, this world had been cold and dead, with thin air and frozen deserts. But the humans had changed it long ago. Now Mars was green and blue, covered with forests and oceans that the conclave maintained in memory of those who had made them. Ra led the young diplomats out of the ship and into the great archive. This was a building as large as a mountain made of white stone that gleamed in the sunlight. Inside were records of everything humanity had ever done, every book they had written, every song they had sung, every discovery they had made, every child they had named. This is the largest library in the galaxy, Ra said as they walked through halls that seemed to go on forever. It would take 1,000,000 lifetimes to read everything here, but today we will focus on one story, the most important story, the story of how humanity saved us all. She brought them to a room filled with floating images. With a gesture, she made the images come alive. They showed a planet covered with blue oceans and green land. Small cities dotted the continents. Ships flew between the stars. This was Earth, 800,000 years ago, Ross said. Humanity had spread to many worlds by then. They had been searching the galaxy for 10,000 years, looking for other intelligent life. And for 10,000 years they had found nothing. The images showed human scientists staring at screens full of data. Their faces were sad and tired. Some of them were crying. Imagine what this was like for them, Ra continued. They had such short lives. A human lived only about 100 years. That is nothing. I have memories older than that, but in their brief lives they accomplished so much. They went from simple tools to starships in just a few thousand years. They were so curious, so eager to meet others, so full of hope. She changed the images. Now they showed humans gathering in great halls, debating and arguing. When they finally accepted that they were alone in the universe, they had to make a choice. They could give up. They could turn inward and simply enjoy their remaining time. Many species would have done this, but the humans chose differently. The images showed humans building enormous ships. These ships were not sleek and fast like modern vessels. They were slow and heavy, designed to travel for thousands of years. They called it the Seeding Initiative, Ra said. Their greatest project, their gift to a future they would never see. Moved closer to the images, his gaseous form flickering with interest. How did it work? Ra smiled, or made the expression that served as a smile for her crystalline face. They studied every planet that might support life. They learned what conditions were needed for intelligence to evolve. Then they sent ships to those planets carrying everything needed to start the process. The images showed the great ships arriving at distant worlds. Small pods dropped from them, falling through atmospheres to land on the surface. The pods opened and released clouds of tiny machines. These machines were very clever, Ra explained. They could survive for millions of years. They would change the planet slowly, making the air breathable, making the water clean, making the soil rich. And they would guide evolution, helping life develop toward intelligence. But evolution takes so long, said. Millions of years, tens of millions. The humans could not have lived to see the results. No, Ra agreed. They knew they would not, they did it anyway. She changed the images again. Now they showed individual humans. A woman with gray hair stood in a field of golden grain. A man with dark skin held a baby in his arms. A child laughed while playing with a small animal. These are the Seeders, Ra said. Ordinary humans who gave their lives to the initiative. The woman is called Sarah. She was a farmer from a place called Kansas. She spent 50 years designing the organisms that would eventually become the plants on Mai. She never saw. She died 800,000 years before my species gained awareness, but without her work I would not exist. The young diplomat stared at the image of Sarah. She looked so fragile, so temporary. Her skin would wrinkle, her hair would fall out, her body would fail. She had less than a century of life, and she spent most of it working for people she would never meet. Why? Myra Seven asked. Her voice was confused. Why would anyone work so hard for something they could never see or enjoy? It does not seem logical. Ra turned to the machine intelligence with ancient eyes. That question is the key to understanding humans. They did not think like us. They did not need to see the results of their work. They did not need rewards or recognition. They simply loved. They loved their children, so they wanted their children to have companions among the stars. They loved the idea of life, so they wanted the universe to be full of it. They loved the future, even though they would not be part of it. She gestured, and the images changed to show a human writing something on a piece of paper. The human was very old, with white hair and hands that shook. This is James Wright, Ross said. He was a poet. On his last day of life, knowing he had only hours left, he wrote a poem for the species that would someday evolve on a planet called 186F. That species would not exist for another 30 million years. He would be dead for longer than most stars burn. But he wrote them a poem anyway, welcoming them to existence, telling them they were loved, asking them to be kind to each other. The room was very quiet. The young diplomats had stopped moving. Even, who had been so dismissive before, stood perfectly still with all his eyes fixed on the image of the dying poet. The seeding initiative lasted for 5,000 years, Ra continued. Generations of humans were born, lived, and died while working on it. They seeded over 10,000 worlds. They created genetic libraries containing the building blocks of 1 million possible species. They wrote messages, recorded videos, composed music, and created art, all for beings who would not exist until they were long forgotten. She looked at each of the young diplomats in turn. That is what humans were. That is why we remember them. Not because they were powerful, not because they were wise, not because they lived long or conquered great enemies. We remember them because they loved us. They loved us before we were born. They loved us so much that they spent their entire civilization making sure we would exist. Spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I feel strange. I feel like I should be grateful, but I do not know how to be grateful enough. What they gave us is too big. Yes, Ra said gently. That feeling never goes away. I have lived for 4,000 years and I still feel it every day. The weight of their gift is impossible to carry, but we try. We try because they would have wanted us to try. We try because it is the only way to honor what they did. She began walking toward the door. Come, there is more to see. The story does not end with the seeding. In fact, the hardest part is still to come, the part that explains why the humans are gone. The young diplomats followed her in silence. Their minds were full of new thoughts. Their hearts were full of new feelings. And somewhere deep inside each of them, something was beginning to change. They were starting to understand what it meant to be loved by the dead. The ship left Mars and traveled inward, toward the third planet from Sol. As they approached, the young diplomats gathered at the viewing window and stared at what they saw. Earth was covered by a shell of crystal. The entire planet was enclosed in a transparent sphere, like a precious jewel kept safe inside glass. Through the crystal, they could see the continents and oceans below. Cities still stood on the land. Roads still connected them. Parks and forests still grew green between the buildings. Everything was preserved exactly as it had been 800,000 years ago. It is a tomb, Myra 7 said softly. The entire planet is a tomb. Yes, Ra replied. The greatest tomb in the galaxy, the final resting place of the species that gave us everything. Their ship did not land on Earth. No ship ever did. Instead, they flew in orbit around the crystal shell, looking down at the frozen world below. The young diplomats pressed against the windows, trying to see every detail. They saw empty streets where humans had once walked. They saw houses where humans had once lived. They saw playgrounds where human children had once laughed and played. Why did they die? Asked. His voice was quiet now, all his earlier arrogance gone. You said they seeded thousands of worlds. They were clearly a powerful species. What could have killed them all? Ra was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with an old grief that never faded. They chose to die, she said. They chose it so that we could live. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the viewing room. It showed a map of the galaxy, with the Sol system marked as a small dot near one of the spiral arms. 700,000 years ago, long after the seeding initiative ended, humanity detected something strange near the center of the galaxy. A wave of energy was spreading outward, moving slowly but unstoppably. They called it the entropic cascade. The display showed a dark stain spreading from the galactic core. It moved like ink dropped in water, flowing outward in all directions. The cascade was not natural, Ra continued. To this day, we do not know what created it. Perhaps it was a weapon left over from some ancient war. Perhaps it was an experiment that went wrong. Perhaps it was simply a flaw in the fabric of reality itself. What we do know is what it did. The display zoomed in on a star system in the path of the cascade. As the dark wave touched the system, the stars flickered and died. The planets crumbled into dust. Everything simply stopped existing. The cascade destroyed everything it touched, Ra said. Matter, energy, even space and time itself came apart, and it was moving toward the seeded worlds, toward us. Made a sound of horror, but we were not even intelligent yet. We could not have defended ourselves. Exactly, Ra said. The species humanity had worked so hard to create were still developing. Some were just beginning to use tools. Some were still swimming in primordial oceans. None of us could even understand the danger, let alone fight it. She changed the display. Now it showed human ships gathering in great fleets. Millions of vessels, ranging from small fighters to enormous warships the size of planets. Humanity faced a choice. They could flee. Their ships were fast enough to reach another galaxy to escape the cascade entirely. They could have saved themselves and started over somewhere else. But they did not, Myra 7 said. It was not a question. No, they did not. They chose to stay and fight. They chose to protect the children they had planted across the galaxy, even though those children did not know they existed. The display showed battles. Human ships flew into the darkness of the cascade and were destroyed. For every ship that fell, two more took its place. The fighting went on for years, then decades, then centuries. The war against the cascade lasted 3,000 years, Ross said. 3,000 years of constant fighting, 3,000 years of dying. Humanity threw everything they had into the battle. They burned their own colonies to create barriers of stabilized space. They built weapons that cost entire solar systems to fire. They sacrificed everything, over and over again, to slow the cascade's advance. Tears would have fallen from the young diplomat's eyes if they had been species that could cry. Instead, they showed their grief in other ways. Many eyes dimmed. Colors faded to gray. Myra 7's lights flickered with distress. Their population fell from trillions to billions, Ra continued. Then from billions to millions. Each generation knew they would probably not survive. Each generation fought anyway. Parents sent their children to war, knowing they would never see them again. Children said goodbye to parents, knowing they would never come home. She paused, gathering herself. Even after 4,000 years, this part of the story was hard to tell. In the end, humanity developed a weapon that could stop the cascade forever. They called it the reality anchor. It was a device so powerful that it took 500 years to build. It required the combined energy of 1,000 suns, and it could only be activated from inside the cascade itself. The display showed a single ship, larger than any that had come before, flying toward the heart of the darkness. 10,000 smaller ships flew with it, protecting it from the chaos of the cascade. The final fleet, Ross said. 10,000 ships, 100 million humans, every single one of them volunteers, every single one of them knowing they would never return. The young diplomats watched as the fleet entered the cascade. The display showed ships being torn apart by the forces inside, but the fleet kept going. They pushed through the destruction, losing ship after ship, until finally the great vessel at the center reached its destination. The reality anchor activated, Ross said. The cascade collapsed. The threat that would have destroyed all life in the galaxy was ended forever. The display went dark. None of them survived, Ross said into the silence. Not one. The last humans died inside the cascade, holding the anchor in place until it finished its work. They saved a galaxy full of species they had never met. They gave their lives for children who did not even know they existed. She gestured toward the crystal-covered planet below. The humans who remained on Earth watched their fleet disappear into the darkness. They knew what was happening. They knew that their species was ending. They spent their final days preparing this world as a memorial. They preserved everything they could. They left messages for us, explaining what they had done and why. Then they sealed themselves inside the crystal shell and waited to die. Ra moved to the window and looked down at Earth. The last human died alone in a small house in a place called Ireland. Her name was Mary. She was 93 years old. Her final words were recorded by the automated systems that still maintain this place. She said, "I hope they know we loved them. I hope they know we would do it all again." The ship continued its orbit around the tomb of humanity. Inside, the young diplomats stood in silence, trying to understand a sacrifice too large for words. They had come to this system thinking they would see old monuments and hear old stories. Instead, they had learned the truth about their existence. They had learned that they were alive because an entire species had chosen to die for them. And they would never be the same again. The ship landed on Earth's moon, in a place called the Sea of Tranquility. This was where humans had first walked on a world other than their own, so long ago that the number of years was hard to understand. A small monument marked the spot where they had taken their first steps. Beside it stood a much larger building, white and shining, built by the Conclave to house the most precious treasures in the galaxy. Ra led the young diplomats inside. The building was called the Hall of Messages, and it contained something that no other archive in the universe could match. After the seeding initiative began, Ra explained as they walked through the entrance, humans started recording personal messages, not official records, not scientific data, just ordinary people talking to the species they were helping to create. They entered a vast room filled with floating screens. Millions of them, billions of them. They stretched into the distance further than the eye could see, each one showing the face of a human who had lived and died hundreds of thousands of years ago. "There is a message here for every seeded world," Ra said. "Not just one message, millions of messages. Individual humans recording their thoughts, their hopes, their dreams, all addressed to beings who would not exist for geological ages." She touched one of the screens, and it expanded to show an old woman sitting in a garden. Flowers bloomed around her. A gentle breeze moved her gray hair. She smiled at the camera with eyes that held both sadness and hope. "Hello," the woman said. "My name is Sarah. I am a farmer from a place called Kansas on a planet called Earth. You do not know where that is. You have probably never heard of it, and that is okay. I did not make this message so you would remember me. I made it so you would know that someone somewhere a long time ago was thinking about you." The young diplomats watched in stunned silence. This was the same Sarah whose image they had seen in the Mars archive, the woman who had designed the organisms that eventually became the... "I spent my whole life working on something called the Seeding Initiative," Sarah continued. "We were planting the seeds of life across the galaxy. I focused on a planet we called 442b. It is a beautiful world with purple skies and crystal mountains. Someday, something will grow there, something intelligent, something wonderful, and that something is you." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I want you to know that you were not an accident. You were not random. You were chosen. We looked at thousands of possible worlds and picked yours because we believed it could produce something special. We designed your world with love. Every mineral, every chemical, every condition was placed there because we thought it would help you become who you are." Ra's crystal body had begun to glow with emotion. This message was for her people. This woman, dead for 800,000 years, was speaking to her. "I will not live to see you," Sarah said. Her voice became soft. "I know that. I am already old and you will not exist for millions of years, but I want you to know that I have dreamed about you. I have imagined what you might look like. I have wondered what language you will speak, what songs you will sing, what questions you will ask. I have loved you, even though we will never meet." Tears appeared in the old woman's eyes. "Please be kind to each other. Please take care of your world. Please look up at the stars and know that you are not alone. Even if everyone who made you is gone, even if our names are forgotten, even if our world is dust, we are still with you. We are in every breath you take. We are in every thought you think. We are in the very atoms of your bodies because we put them there." She reached toward the camera, as if trying to touch someone who would not exist for geological ages. "Goodbye, my children. I love you. I always will." The screen went dark. The room was completely silent. Ra stood motionless, her crystal form flickering with colors that had no name. She had seen this message before. She had seen it 100 times. It still broke her heart every time. "There are messages for all of us?" asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," Ra said. "Every species, every world. Millions of humans recorded messages for each one. They wanted to make sure you knew you were loved. They wanted to make sure you never felt alone the way they did." She guided them through the hall, stopping at different screens. They watched a young man with dark skin sing, a song he had written for the beings who would someday evolve in the clouds of a distant gas giant. They watched a child, no more than 10 years old, show off her drawings of what she imagined alien life might look like. They watched an old scientist explain, in simple words, how to build a faster-than-light engine, just in case the information might be useful someday. Every message was personal. Every message was filled with love. Every message was a bridge across time, connecting beings who could never meet but who were family nonetheless. "I do not understand," said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Why did they do this? They gained nothing from it. They would never know if we received these messages. They would never see our reactions. Why spend so much effort on something so pointless?" Ra turned to him with gentle eyes. "That is what makes it so powerful. They did it knowing they would never be thanked. They did it knowing they would never see the results. They loved without any hope of reward. That is the form of love there is." She led them to a special section of the hall where screens showed messages that had been recorded during humanity's final years. These were different from the earlier ones. The humans in these videos looked tired, worried, afraid. The war against the Cascade was raging. Their species was dying. But still, they recorded messages. One screen showed a soldier in battle armor. Behind him, explosions lit up the sky. His face was covered in dirt and blood, but his eyes were steady. "I don't have much time," the soldier said. "My unit is about to deploy against the Cascade. Most of us won't come back, but I wanted to record this anyway. I wanted you to know that we're fighting for you, not for glory, not for revenge, not for territory, just for you, so you can live, so you can grow, so you can become whatever you're meant to become." He smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I won't see you, but I believe in you. I believe you'll be good. I believe you'll be kind. I believe you'll take what we've given you and make something beautiful. And that belief is enough. That belief makes everything worth it." The screen went dark. Another came to life, showing a mother holding a baby. The mother was crying. "This is my daughter," she said. "Her name is Hope. She was born 3 days ago. I named her Hope because that's what you are to us. You are our hope. Even as everything falls apart, even as we lose everyone we love, we have hope because of you. Because someday you will exist. Someday you will look up at the stars and wonder. Someday you will find this message and know that you were worth everything. Everything." The young diplomats watched message after message. They saw humans laughing, crying, singing, praying. They saw parents recording messages for children they would never have because they had chosen to fight instead. They saw scientists recording their final discoveries, hoping the knowledge would be useful. They saw ordinary people recording ordinary thoughts, just wanting to be remembered. And slowly, the young diplomats began to understand what the pilgrimage was really about. It was not about seeing monuments or learning history. It was about feeling the weight of humanity's love. It was about understanding that they existed because someone had cared enough to create them. It was about accepting a gift so large that it could never be repaid. Spoke in a voice that trembled with emotion. They loved us. They really loved us, not as an idea, not as a project, as children, as family. "Yes," Ra said, "and that is why we remember. That is why we will always remember. because love like that deserves to be remembered forever. The final stop on the pilgrimage was the Chamber of Names. It was located deep inside Earth's moon, in a hollow sphere carved from solid rock. The young diplomats followed Ra through long tunnels lit by soft blue lights until they emerged into a space so vast it took their breath away. The chamber was a perfect sphere, a kilometer across, and every centimeter of its inner surface was covered with names. Human names, billions of them, carved into imperishable metal that would last until the stars themselves went dark. 12 billion names, Ra said, her voice echoing in the enormous space. Every human who ever lived, every person who contributed to the seeding, every soldier who fought the cascade, every mother, father, child, friend, and stranger who ever walked on Earth or any of its colonies. They are all here. They are all remembered. Platforms floated in the center of the chamber, allowing visitors to move close to the walls and read the names. The young diplomats stepped onto these platforms and drifted toward the curved surface, their eyes moving over the endless lists. John Smith, Maria, Way, Fatima Al, James Wright, Sarah. The names went on forever, spiraling across the walls in patterns that seemed random but somehow formed a beautiful design. This is our most sacred duty, Ra said. The recitation, every species that comes here must speak the names aloud. Not all of them, that would take centuries, but enough to honor the dead, enough to remember. She gestured, and a section of the wall glowed brighter than the rest. Each species is assigned a section. These are the names of humans who worked specifically on the scientists who designed your evolution, the engineers who built the machines that shaped your planet, the dreamers who imagined what you might become. The young diplomats looked at their assigned sections. Thousands of names glowed on the wall, each one a human who had given their life to making them possible. Speak them, Ra said. Read the names aloud. Let your voice carry across time and honor those who gave you everything. One by one, the young diplomats began to read. Their voices were different, clicking buzzes, ethereal whispers, Myra Seven's musical tones, but they all spoke the same thing. Names, human names, the names of the dead who had died so they could live. Robert Johnson, Elizabeth Martinez, Anna. The names echoed through the chamber, filling it with sound. Other species had gathered on distant platforms. Ra realized that dozens of delegations had arrived while they were in the Hall of Messages. Beings from every corner of the galaxy had come to perform the same ritual. The chamber was alive with voices, each one speaking names in their own language, their own style, their own way of showing respect. Hours passed. The young diplomats grew tired, but they did not stop. They understood now why this mattered. Each name was a person. Each person had loved them. Each person deserved to be remembered. Finally, when the last name had been spoken, silence fell over the chamber. The young diplomats floated in the center of the sphere, surrounded by billions of names, feeling the weight of history pressing down on them. Spoke first. His voice was changed. The arrogance and skepticism of youth had been burned away, leaving something deeper and stronger. I want to record a message, he said. Ra looked at him with surprise. A message for whom? For the species we are seeding now. The Conclave has continued humanity's work. We are creating new life on new worlds. Someday, those beings will come here just like we did. I want them to find a message from me. I want them to know that the chain of love did not break. I want them to know that they are loved too. The other young diplomats murmured agreement. They all wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to pass on what they had received. They wanted to become part of the story that humanity had begun. Ra felt her ancient crystal heart swell with emotion. This was why the pilgrimage existed. This was why every generation had to make this journey, not just to learn about the past, but to be changed by it. Not just to receive love, but to learn how to give it. The recording facilities are in the next chamber, she said. You can each make as many messages as you wish. They will be stored until the beings you are speaking to are ready to receive them. It may take millions of years, but they will wait. They will always wait. The young diplomats left to record their messages, leaving Ra alone in the Chamber of Names. She floated in the silence, looking at the walls covered with human names. She had been here so many times. She had spoken so many names, but it never felt like enough. She drifted to a section of the wall she always visited when she came here. A small cluster of names, no different from any other. Sarah, Lisa, the family who had designed her world, the people who had made her possible. "Hello, grandmother," she whispered. It was not literally true. Sarah was not her ancestor in any biological sense, but it felt true. It felt right. "I brought more children to see you today. They were young and foolish like all young things, but they understand now. They felt your love. They will carry it forward." She touched the wall gently, her crystal fingers tracing the letters of Sarah's name. The chain continues. We have seeded 5,000 new worlds since we joined the conclave. Someday, those worlds will produce intelligent life. Someday, those beings will come here and learn about you. Your love will spread to every corner of the universe. It will never end. I promise you, it will never end. She stayed there for a long time, floating in the silence, communing with the dead who had given her life. Then she turned and followed her students to the recording chamber. The young diplomats were already speaking into cameras, recording their messages for future generations. Their words were simple but sincere. They talked about their worlds, their lives, their hopes for the beings who would someday exist. They told stories about the humans who had created everything. They passed on the gift they had received. Looked up as Ra entered. "Will you record a message too, Ambassador?" Ra considered the question. She had recorded many messages over her long life, but perhaps one more would not hurt. "Yes," she said, "I will." She moved to an empty recording station and looked into the camera. Somewhere, millions of years in the future, a being she could not imagine would watch this recording and learn that they were loved. "Hello," she began. "My name is Ra. I am from a world that was seeded by a species called humanity. You do not know who they were, but I am going to tell you. I am going to tell you the most important story in the universe. The story of how you came to exist. The story of why you are loved." She talked for a long time. She told the whole story from the beginning. The lonely humans searching for companionship, the seeding initiative, the war against the cascade, the sacrifice, the messages, the names. And when she was finished, she said the words that every being who made this journey said at the end of their recording. "You are not alone. You were never alone. Across the vast darkness of space and time, we are with you. We believe in you. We love you. Now it is your turn. Pass this gift to those who come after. Keep the chain unbroken. Remember the humans. Remember that you are loved." She ended the recording and sat in silence. Around her, the young diplomats were finishing their own messages. They would return to their homes changed. They would tell others what they had learned. They would live their lives differently because of what had happened here. And someday, millions of years from now, beings who did not yet exist would come to this place and feel the same thing they had felt. The love that had no ending. The gift that could never be repaid. The memory of a species called humanity, who had loved so deeply that their love echoed across 800,000 years and would echo for 800,000 more. The chain would not be broken. The ancient ones would always be remembered.